So, this coming year is the year of the snake. What does that mean?
There's this fantastic story that my parents told me, which is that the heavens decided to have this huge race where all the animals were going to be having this race, and the top 12 animals actually would have years named after them. And so these 12 years would be in cycle for 12 years at a time, and it was in order of whoever won the race. It's one of my favorite stories because the rat, who is one of the smallest animals, but the smartest animal, looked around at all the other animals and saw the ox and said, that is clearly the strongest animal. And so the rat actually jumped on top of the head of the ox and right before the finish line jumped off first. And so the rat is actually the fastest, sorry, it's the first of the 12 animals that we use for the zodiac symbols for the calendar year. But this is the year of the snake, which is very exciting because there's a lot of fantastic repertoire that has to do with snakes. Serpents, of course, have a lot of different lore through folklore and also through music, of course, because of that.
I think there's a lot about being grounded in this time of year, right? Like the association is also that there's a lot of wood for the year of the snake, and that's about sort of grounding yourself in
Yeah, each of the animals has just like, in other zodiac mythologies or whatnot, has certain characteristics. The dragon or the horses are very sensitive, and the snakes being low to the ground are like, again, like you said, like they're grounded both literally and figuratively. And so there's a lot of different characteristics for each of the years, but there's oftentimes a little bit of awareness. But I mean, like, there's snakes are obviously feared, but they are also fearsome too. They're also full of fear as well. So
So we just had a big snow in Nashville, but the imagery around wood and then also the imagery around spring, it feels like it's all about growth and newness, but can you talk about how the spring imagery kind of permeates this program?
well, the whole idea of the New Year is that we really celebrate. Obviously, this is a Lunar New Year, and this is a time of the year where change is over, and that we start entering, hopefully, some of the more warm months and the harvests. And so, this celebration of the spring and looking forward is a very special time for a lot of those countries and cultures that celebrate Lunar New Year. And so, this is a exciting time of the year full of rebirth, renewal, and so many of the traditions that are surrounding that have to do with starting the year anew and waiting for the rebirth. So, for instance, in my culture, in Chinese culture growing up, you'd always wear new clothes, you'd always clean the house, so you're always starting the year with a fresh start. And I think that a lot of the repertoire for this concert has to do with that spring, exciting music that is exciting and talking about the excitement of anticipating the new year.
Like, for example, jasmine flower.
Oh yeah, Molly Hua, Jasmine Flower is actually the most famous folk song in Chinese cultures, and in fact, it's actually used, I believe, in Turandot, the opera. It is a very, very famous tune. But the first two pieces that we have for this concert, Welcome to New Year and the Spring Festival Overture, is they're both incredibly energetic works. And again, there's a lot of celebratory sounds within the music. There's percussion that is very splashy. There's Chinese percussion and cymbals that have a very higher pitch than we usually use for like Beethoven or Mahler. And that iconic splashy sound is all over these works. And it sort of, again, represents the excitement and the boisterousness that we have in celebrating the upcoming year.
And I think for people who went through the American music education system, Song of Arirang will probably be the really familiar melody for this concert. A lot of us played it in school on a recorder or on another instrument in music classes in elementary school. So, can you just talk a little bit about what the orchestral version of this tune is like?
Yeah, it's very similar to the Molly Hua for the Chinese cultures. In Korean cultures, Arirang is again the most famous folk song of all time. And there's actually this wonderful many folk songs are very similar, and we also learn pitches when we're babies in a very specific order for this pentatonic scale. It's like 5 notes in the scale that's very iconic for Asian cultures. And so a lot of this music and these folk songs, you're going to hear some of those pentatonic songs sounds, which is why many kids in America as all around the world actually learn these folk songs, because it's actually very easy to play because you're only learning 3 or 4 or 5 notes to be able to play these songs. But this concert actually features, the Angel of Formosa, which is another famous, beautiful melody that was written in tribute to a friend of the composer. But the Molihua, the Jasmine Flower, Arirang, these songs may be very familiar actually to the audiences. And the combination of a classical orchestra and these Asian tunes is actually not that far apart, because there are many composers, like we just mentioned, Puccini, Ravel, actually use Debussy, will use a lot of these scales, a lot of these sounds for the classical orchestra, and it really translates very nicely into these arrangements that these various composers have done on these very traditional songs, vocal songs that have been translated for the orchestra.
So, in addition to these beautiful folk songs, there's also some newer music. Can you talk a little bit about these two folk songs for orchestra by Huang Ruo?
Classical music is not just from like the 19th century, right? We have composers that are composing today, that are living composers today that are building off of all the things that we learned from Mozart, from Bach, from Beethoven, and newer composers like Stravinsky and whatnot. And so these setting of these folk songs are actually very old songs, but they're set in a much more modern way, using the full capacity of a symphonic orchestra at Nashville Symphony, for instance, and all the percussion, all the rhythms. And so it makes it actually really fun. There's these two composers. I mean, like Vivian Fung is a contemporary composer as well, and these sounds that she's using for this pizzicato movement are based off of very old traditional instruments. But again, we're having violins, we're having cellos, violas, basses, that are not Asian instruments, but they're imitating the sounds of Asian instruments. And so like I mentioned before, that combination of classical Western instruments playing and imitating sounds of the Eastern cultures is actually not that far apart, because again, over the last centuries, that has actually been happening for many times. And so, for instance, we have this Ravel work from Mother Goose that features that pentatonic scale in such a beautiful way, and of course is about the princess who is a snake. And so those sounds are perfect for this year of the snake as well. But these folk songs are set in a very sweeping way and a very beautiful way, and so these melodies that come through are very we call it cantabiles. It's like you're hearing the orchestra sing even though there's no voice.
Lunar New Year, big holiday, and you are Chinese American. So, what are some of the ways that you are used to celebrating Lunar New Year?
So my mom grew up in China, but she had to leave China because of the war, and she ended up going to Taiwan. But she had a lot of different traditions. Obviously, as kids, the best traditions have to do with money and food. And so, like the food that was there for Chinese New Year's was some of my absolute favorite. And then, of course, all your relatives give you these hongbao, these red envelopes, and the red envelopes might have, a crisp, like completely new $1 bill, or it might be like $20, or $2 bills, which we treasured because you never see the $2 bills around. But a lot of the traditions have to do with starting the new year as best as you can. So we would buy new clothes and wear it for New Year's. We'd clean the house. There's this funny tradition where you actually cook some fish, and fish is often seen as a sign of abundance because the scales oftentimes look like money. But you don't eat the fish. You actually cook the fish, but you don't eat it. It never made sense to me. But some of my favorite food memories have to do with the Chinese New Year celebrations that my parents and I would celebrate with our neighbors.
And this event at the Nashville Symphony, this is more than a concert. This is the whole Lunar New Year celebration. Can you talk a little bit about the other bits and pieces, the things going on in the lobby and all the community involvement?
Yeah, I mean, we're really excited because, again, the New Year is just a celebration, whether it is the New Year that happens on December 31st or it's a Lunar New Year. And so we took it as an opportunity to invite areas of the Nashville community to come celebrate with us. And so there will be dragon dancers that are going to be there. There's going to be poetry readings. There's going to be a lot of fun celebrations and activities for the families to be involved in. And so that they're not only experiencing the music that the Nashville Symphony is playing from these various cultures, but also participating in what my childhood was like in Lunar New Year, which is, all the activities and being with my friends and community.